Hello lovelies, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you are returning. Now, my name is Candy, and here on my channel I talk all things magical, decks, divination, magical gardening, magic adventures, all sorts of things, magic art, witchery, all of that sort of stuff. So if that sounds good, then you are most welcome here. Now, I'm actually going to film a part 2 today of the tag picture book decks, which is a tag from Rachel over at Second Thoughts About the Mission. And just like Rachel, I am a huge picture book fan, and when she came up with this tag, I just thought that's for me, because I love decks, I love picture books, I love art, and I have loads of picture books. It's just a lovely way and a lovely excuse really to talk about decks and to talk about art. So I've grabbed a selection. Well, I didn't grab a selection. This is what was left over from the part 1 I did, which I will link below, as well as all of Rachel's information as well. So we're going to start off with Judith Kerr classic, The Tiger Who Came to Tea. So not only was this a classic that I read with my own children, but it's also a classic from a teaching point of view. I spent over a decade as an infant teacher in primary schools here in England, specialising with like year 1, so the 5-year-olds. And I only gave that up when I had my own children, so that I went straight into reading these to my kids as well. So this is, of course, so well known. It's about the tiger that came to tea, and he just fits right in the house, just joining in, just getting on really well with everybody. So this is the tiger who came to tea. And for this one, I just thought we need animals doing kind of human-like things. So my favourite tarot deck like this is the Tarot of Curious Creatures by Chris Ann. So I know this divides people. Some people adore decks like this, where you've got animal heads on human bodies. Some people can't stand it. I would say, even if you're not really sure, if you're on the fence, this deck is well worth taking the risk with, because this deck is fantastic. Now, I'm currently using this deck for my year ahead spread, so there are continually cards out from this deck representing each month, and it has been spookily accurate. In fact, we're at the halfway point. It might even be that it's so interesting what's happened using this deck for my year ahead spread that it almost deserves a video. But you can see you've got all of these animal heads on human bodies, and it is so well done, this deck. You've got all the Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism still in there, and it's so carefully done and so carefully put together that it does Rider-Waite-Smith and more. It's not flippant, it's got added meanings, it's got everything in and more, and I love it. I think if you ever wanted to try a deck like this is the one to go for. It is just so lovely, and the backs, these colours, just gorgeous. So it's always a joy for me to share the Tarot of Curious Creatures. It's one of my all-time favourite decks, to be honest, and I love it. So I thought that was a brilliant one to go with, the Tiger Who Came to Tea. Next, I've got something slightly different. Now, if you are my sort of age, so 50s, mid-50s, you might recognise these magazines, these Twinkle magazines. Now, these magazines were the magazine of my girlhood. I used to always look forward so much to the next Twinkle magazine that came out every Thursday, 9p as it says. And I loved this magazine. So I had a big pile growing up as a kid of these magazines. I loved the characters in them. It was so special just to get a new Twinkle magazine. Now, these aren't the actual magazines. I've just been trying to track them down. And I think these few magazines were a couple of lots on eBay. I just saw them one day and thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get some. And as I see them around, it's just such a nostalgia trip for me, this kids magazine. I love it. So you've got all of these lovely stories. Molly and her dollies. Look at this, Molly and her dollies. Just so nostalgic. Oh, I love it. So I would always really look forward to this. It was like a little bundle of magic on the pages. So I thought, okay, let's think about a deck that's also got this kind of nostalgic, childlike art style that I constantly look forward to using, and it makes me squeal with delight. It's got to be the Kawaii Tarot. It has just got to be this deck, because just as being a little girl waiting for the next week's Twinkle magazine, this deck with these cards makes me feel exactly the same. I feel like a little girl all over again, just squealing with delight. Every card feels like the Thursday 9p magazine coming through the door. I mean, look at these. It's just so wonderful. So you've got owls asleep on moons, and you've got frog chariots being pulled by butterflies, and lots of cakes and sweets and cups and high tea. It's just the most glorious fun time, amazing deck. So these are the backs. I mean, look at that. This always reminds me of the Moomins, which I talked about in my last picture book decks video. But I mean, look at the Lovers card. So this deck always, every time, makes me squeal with delight just at how cute and awesome and wonderful it is, and I love it. So it just is like being a kid again, waiting for the Twinkle magazine to come through the door. So that's a Twinkle magazine and the Kawaii, or the Kawaii Tarot. I'm not quite sure. I think it might be Kawaii Tarot, but however I pronounce it, this is just so lovely, this deck. Now this next book is massively special. So this is Happy Dog, Sad Dog, and again this was one that was bought for Tilly when she was newly born. Of course, when I say it was bought for Tilly, it also means that it's been read to all of my kids, because Tilly is my eldest. So this has been around since I first became a mom and has been read to all of my kids. So this is a really simple baby board book, but it was the absolute favourite of all my kids, and they would all do the actions. We would do big dog, little dog, clean dog, dirty dog, happy dog, sad dog, hot dog, cold dog. Oh my gosh, I love it. Hairy dog, bold dog, awake dog, asleep dog, lots of dogs, and no dogs. So really simple, but really special. So dogs and emotions. So to go with this, I gotta go with a dog deck, and this is my favourite. This is the Divine Dog Wisdom cards, and this deck is just incredible. I want to start with the Joker card, which I see is right on top. There is one card in here which isn't a dog, and that's the Joker card, but the rest of them are all dogs, and they're dogs with various phrases, emotions, or in situations, and it is lovely. So you've got imagination, get the big picture, loneliness, longing to belong, clarity, right under your nose. And I just think that the way that these key phrases are depicted, it's just a really useful deck. There are loads of cards in it as well. It's a big deck. There are 62 cards in this deck, and I don't really see it talked about that much or used much online, but I think it is right up there for animal decks. It is just really lovely, and I couldn't think of any other deck to put in the happy dog sad dog position. And I love it. So this one also lives on Tilly's shelf in the lounge. Sometimes she'll ask to go to school with an accompanying dog card, which is really, really fun. But aren't they lovely? They're just so well done. They are so well done. And this is an Irish Terrier. So this was the dog that I had before I got Rupert and Luna, and I'm going to do an Irish Terrier book in a minute, so that's going to crop up in a minute. And whenever I see that, I think about my Irish Terrier Maisy, who lived till she was 14, and who I loved very much, even though she was the most difficult dog in the whole world. She hated other dogs so badly. I could never ever walk her off lead ever, and yeah, she was a nightmare with other dogs. So to get Rupert and Luna that are both obsessively happy around other dogs, it's so different. But yeah, this is the Divine Dogs wisdom cards, and I love it. So we're nearly at the end. Let me just quickly finish and show you all of the cards. Absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to put some pictures in here of my dog Maisy. She was just a little firecracker. Irish Terriers really are. I think if you've ever been to Crufts to watch the Irish Terriers be judged, it's hysterical because they're so feisty. They really are. And she really was. I loved her with all of my being, but she was also the only terrier I've ever owned and ever will own, having grown up with Alsatians who are trainable and working dogs. To suddenly have a terrier as my first dog out in the adult world, it was a real shock to the system. She was so literally untrainable and independent minded, but so wonderful. And she saw me through some of the hardest years of my life, and she saw me become a mum. She saw me go from a single woman to married. She saw me through divorce and out the other side. So she was really such an important, and will always be such an important part of my life and who I am. And I was so excited to finally get an Irish Terrier. I waited till I'd got a good job. I was teaching. I'd just bought my own house. I knew I had space. I was running home every lunch hour to take her on a run. She would get a run before school. She would get another run after school. I was super fit, so was she. And it was just a lovely time, putting the first building blocks of being a young adult out of university and living my own life. And I joined the Irish Terrier Club. Now, if you know anything about Irish Terriers, the name Lucy Jackson will not be unfamiliar to you. Lucy Jackson is the Irish Terrier world. She is the Irish Terrier Society, and I've had the absolute joy of meeting Lucy on many occasions, even to the point where she came running up to me one year at Crufts and threw her arms around me and said, "I haven't seen you for so long." And she is, I think she's in late 80s now, and she's the epitome of 80 years young. And Lucy's done so much for the Irish Terrier world, including calendars and writing books. And this is a book that Lucy gave me and the kids on one of our meetups, and she said, no, give the kids this book from me. So this was a gift all about Irish Terriers from Lucy Jackson herself, and these adorable illustrations with all the Irish Terriers in there. One thing about Irish Terriers is they do love children. They really do. They can be feisty with other dogs, but they, oh my gosh, they love kids. So that is a really special hand-gifted book from Lucy. And the deck that I thought would go well with it, it's not a dog deck. I couldn't think of a dog deck, but what I did think about is a deck that is like a classic. It can form the building blocks of your collection, like a classic like Rider-Waite or Thoth in your collection. I think the Hanson Roberts is like a real classic to work with, and out of all the classics, it's one that does have this adorable picture book style. I think it definitely is a picture book style artwork. It's kind of like this sort of pencil colouring, and for me, when I look at it, it feels like putting down the building block of a life, which is what it felt like when I had Maisy. It felt like a time when life hadn't kicked me to the curb quite so much, and I was brimming over with enthusiasm and hope and the belief that everything turns out with a happy ever after ending. I'd got my dream dog, I'd bought my dream house, and it's kind of that time that feels like the formation of who you are, which is what Maisy walked with me through. She walked through those formative years and then through hell and out, and watched me drop my naivety of life. But I think this deck does have that naive style to it. It does feel like a deck drawn for a picture book, and I love it. I love the Hanson Roberts. I think out of all of those classic decks, this is my favourite because of the style of it, and I just thought it just felt like such a Maisy deck, which I love. So aren't these just gorgeous? They're so beautiful. So yeah, for the book We Want to Be With You, my Maisy book, I've picked the Hanson Roberts. Okay, another really special picture book for me that is ram-packed with beautiful memories is A Squash and a Squeeze. Again, it's a book that was read to all three of my children. All three of them loved it. And A Squash and a Squeeze, it's like a book with a real moral. If you don't know the story, it's about a lady that is moaning about her house being too small to a wise old man, and he tells her to solve it taking her hen. So she brings the hen into the house, and the hen begins to cause chaos. So she moans again, like, won't you please help me? It's a squash and a squeeze. And he says, taking your goat. So she brings the goat in as well, and then the pig, and you can see what's happening. Chaos is getting more and more. Then he tells her to take in her cow, and she's moaning, but my house is a squash and a squeeze. And then he says, well, take them all out, said the wise old man, but then I'll be back where I first began. So she opens up the window, the hen flies out, she gets rid of the pig and the goat. She pushes the cow out, and then she realises just how big her house actually feels. She's full of frolics and fiddle-de-dees. It isn't a squash and it isn't a squeeze. So basically, taking all the animals in, it taught her to be grateful for what she did have, to see the alternative of a house absolutely ram-packed of all these animals. It made her feel grateful by letting go. So I thought of a gratitude deck and I couldn't think of one. So then I thought about that idea of letting go of things for a better life, for a happier life. Then I thought about the Melody Beattie book, The Language of Letting Go. Now, Melody Beattie has a whole series of books about codependency, which I have read on my healing journey. Look at these colours. I mean, these are... There's the lady herself. These are the colours of picture books if ever I saw them. And if you think you have any people pleasing tendencies, or like you don't put yourself on any sort of priority list, I would urge you to read Melody Beattie's books about codependence. They're so good. So when I saw that there was a deck to go along with Melody's work, I jumped at it. On the back there is a "Today I Will" phrase, and it is so good. So solving problems, allowing things to happen, focusing on peace, enjoying life. So this almost is like the process, what the old lady went through with the house. Like, it taught her to see what she needed to see in life. And I think that this deck also allows you to see what you need to see in life. It is really, really useful. It's one that I don't see talked much about online or on TarotTube. But I mean, you can see just from these titles that it is excellent for kind of reparenting yourself, really. It's like the old man in the story, the wise old man in the story. That's what this deck is. It will show you the way, and I love it. It's a real great one that can help in so many aspects of life. So that is A Squash and a Squeeze with The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beattie. Okay, another book that came along a little bit later in my life. This was read more with Busby, so my youngest child, my son, and he loved this book. So this is the story of Penny and Pup, and it's set in the setting of a garden, and it's just the most beautiful story about Penny the dog, who, when she moved into a new home, had been so worried that they gave her Pup a toy, and Penny adored Pup. And again, there's a synchronicity to the dogs in my life, because my first dog was a rough collie that I got bought for my 10th birthday, and she was called Penny, so I love that as well. So we're kind of on a theme of dogs, aren't we? Anyway, Penny absolutely adores Pup so much that she ignores everybody else wanting to be her friend in the garden. She ignores the cat. She says no thanks when the rabbit wants to play, no thanks to the fox. She's very, very happy with just a Pup. But one day she loses Pup under the shed. She just can't reach her, and she sits and howls. The fox comes to try and help. Then the cat comes to try and help as well. And the rabbit comes over to help, but Pup has gone. So all the animals look for Pup around the garden. Eventually they find Pup, and it's been borrowed by the mommy mouse, and all the babies are asleep in it. So instead of disturbing the mice, Penny goes off to play with her newfound friends that helped her. And the whole book is kind of a lesson about not getting fixated on things, about valuing real friends. And I think that's a message that all of us need to learn from time to time, on repeat through our lives, no matter how old we are. And Penny realises that actually these real life friends are wonderful too. So I went with the setting of this story. I thought, let's find a deck with just a beautiful garden setting, and of course I landed immediately on the Faceted Garden Oracle, which is one of my most beautiful oracle decks that I own. It's a Claire Mac deck with these backs, and I just think that this is the type of garden that you would expect to see in some sort of amazing story. It is well worthy of a storybook. I mean, look at that. Can you imagine a storybook with images like that in it? Wouldn't that be awesome? So although it's not like childish art style, it is incredibly beautiful. Like I said, it's one of my very favourite oracles. It's one of the few oracles that made me cry when I opened it, because I was so blown away by how gorgeous it is. And yeah, I just think it's amazing. So if you're looking for a garden setting, I think this is the deck to turn to for inspiration. And when I saw that opening page with the garden, I just thought, yeah, it's got to be the Faceted Garden. It just has to be. So that's Penny and Pup and the Faceted Garden Oracle. Another absolute classic, not only from my teaching days, but also reading to my kids as well. So this is Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, which of course has been made into a film as well. The film, oh my gosh, it reduced all of my kids to a sobbing mess, the film did. So it's the story of Max, who falls asleep in his room and basically has this incredible adventure and discovers another world and sails across an ocean and lands in this land where the wild things are, and they turn him into their king, and it's just wild revelry and a wild rumpus. So let the rumpus begin. It's just so amazing. I mean, look at these illustrations. If you want incredible, iconic, epic picture book art, then Where the Wild Things Are is literally where it's at. It's just amazing. But of course, eventually Max starts to miss home. He realises how hungry he is. He still hasn't had his tea, and he decides to leave and to sail back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room again, where he found his supper waiting for him, and it was still hot. So it's kind of another one of those books where you're not quite sure whether was that a dream, was it real, how am I supposed to read it. I always like to think that it is actually real. So Where the Wild Things Are, how on earth do I find a deck that fits with that? So I spent a while racking my brains thinking, what deck, and then of course it just jumped into my mind, of course it has to be this one, Into the Lonely Woods, because of this character in this deck. I mean, look, this is just perfect, and it just sums up Where the Wild Things Are. I know that the moment that I saw this deck, which is a Blue Angel deck, that it just screamed to me the picture book Where the Wild Things Are. And to be honest, I think that is one of the reasons why I love it so much. I mean, again, it's that nostalgic feel of these incredible images, but beyond this stunning artwork, I mean, look at this. You've also got gorgeous titles on these cards, and it reads, oh my gosh, it's such a great deck. It really is. It's one of my favourites. It's an absolute masterpiece of a deck. And the art, I mean, look at that. I just can't praise this deck enough. I think it is absolutely stunning. And it's just so perfect for where the wild things are. I can't believe it took me so long to remember it. I almost shared Tarot of the She because I thought, well, that's a land where there are wild, strange creatures and fae. And I was literally about to share that when I suddenly thought, what am I doing? Into the Lonely Woods is, of course, the deck that needs to be shared with this book. But isn't it just stunning? Oh, I love it. Every time I work with this deck, I am blown away. And one of my favourite pairings, which you would never believe, but if you've got these two decks, put them together, is this deck with the Somnia. This deck and the Somnia, they're bonded pairs, a bonded pair for me. They are so awesome together. It's just, you wouldn't think it, because the Somnia is like so cold and it's photographic. You wouldn't think it would go with this deck, but there is something about the two of them together, the way they look together and the way they read together. So if you have this Oracle and you've got the Somnia, honestly, it's brilliant. Or if you've got the Somnia and you're looking for a Oracle to work with it, try this one. It's brilliant. That's what I've found anyway. And then finally, for part 2 of this tag, because there's going to be a part 3, there's possibly going to be a part 4 as well. I couldn't do this tag without putting Jill Murphy's Peace at Last. It is a classic Key Stage 1 teacher's book to use. It's also one of my kids' all-time favourite picture books, and it's the story of a mom bear and a daddy bear and a baby bear who were all going to sleep at night because the hour was late. They go up to bed absolutely exhausted. Mrs. Bear falls asleep, but Mr. Bear doesn't. And Mrs. Bear begins to snore. So the whole premise of this book, if you don't know it, is that Mr. Bear is continually disturbed and he's so tired and wants to go to sleep, but he just can't. He goes away from Mrs. Bear's snoring to his baby bear's room. Baby Bear is too lively though, keeps him awake, so he goes downstairs, but the cuckoo clock keeps him awake. He tries to sleep at the kitchen table, but the dripping tap and the whirring of the fridge keeps him awake. He tries to go out to the garden, but there's owls and so many different noises out there. He tries to sleep in the car and he can't, and in the very early hours of the morning he sneaks back up to bed. Everything is now quiet and he falls asleep, but just as he falls asleep the alarm clock goes off. Oh my gosh, how many of us adults have had that experience where we've just fallen asleep as the alarm clock goes off? So that's the story of Peace at Last, tracking down and seeking out some peace as an adult. And although this isn't at all linked to the style, I think thematically, for me personally, I had to go with the Mother Mary deck, because for me, my practice with Mary is where I find the most peace, and it's taken me a few years to realise that. I had an incredible experience in the Chalice Well Gardens in Glastonbury, where I ended up sobbing in the middle of the garden, standing with my feet in the water, just feeling like a power come up through the ground, through the water at me, and knowing it was Mary energy. And it did just feel like finally being pulled into a mother's lap that's warm and has got my back and sees me and is safe. Oh, it was peace at last. It was the quiet bed when you're exhausted. It felt like the end of a search for something that had previously not been able to be found. There was always something in the way of that peace, that engulfing feeling of being in a mother's lap, that was always unreachable until I started working with Mary. Now, I have a few Mary decks. I'm also currently learning to pray the rosary, which is on my desk just to the left of me. So it is a practice I'm slowly and gradually developing and leaning more into. But every time I do, there is a peace in it. And I was really surprised at first, because I am somebody that left the Christian church to move into paganism, and that link with Christianity was bothersome to me for a number of reasons, until I, reading a book recently, which I'll share in another video, it talked about the fact that Mary keeps all the doors and windows and the back doors open to heaven to let anybody in of any faith, just people who know how to love. And she's a figure for me that really brings all faiths together into kind of like a cosmic energy and a cosmic peace. Does this make any sense at all? So if you're Christian, you get through the front gate of heaven, which for me is just like that cosmic energy. But if you're not Christian, Mary always has got your back. She's got a back window open somewhere, or the back door unlocked, and she will welcome anybody. So I just think it's just brought me such a huge amount of comfort and peace that there was just no way I could share that story without sharing a Mary deck. And this one, oh my gosh, this one is just a stunner. So that's my deck for peace at last. So that's the end of part 2, guys. I do have so many more books, and I've also got all my Ladybird edition books that I would like to do this tag for. Are you up for another at least 2 videos for this tag? And like I said, it's just a lovely chance to share some imagery, to share some memories, and to wrap it all up with sharing decks. So I think it's fun. So let me know if you're up for another part 3 and part 4. Thank you, Rachel, again. I'll leave all Rachel's links, and go and visit her fantastic tarot channel. Second Thoughts About the Mission is her channel. I'll link it below. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I'm loving it, as you can tell. So thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.